Hello, everyone. Toni Saunders here, and welcome back to My Passion. Today, we're going to talk about or continue the federally recognized disabilities. And today is intellectual. Now, what constitutes an intellectual impairment? How do you know that it's true? And no parent wants to hear that their child is intellectually impaired because all of their hopes and dreams cannot be realized the way that they thought it would be. So, what is an intellectual impairment? It's when you get a psychological evaluation or a neuropsychological evaluation, and the full scale IQ is 70 or below. That means that every score on the evaluation is below 70. Now, if by chance there is an outlier of 80 or above, then they can't call it an intellectual impairment, because 80 is low average. 70 is what they call borderline, meaning borderline intellectual impairment. So let's talk about this. Intellectual impairment means that it's very difficult for the student to learn anything. And they're typically placed in a substantially separate classroom where they can get specially designed instruction. What does that mean? It means that every IEP is different. It takes information from the evaluations and it actually tells you what the student needs to learn, whether it be a computer or any kind of device that could help them, whether it could be someone sitting beside them, a paraprofessional, and when they're taught something, the paraprofessional goes over it and over it and over it with the student. Now, all students are not intellectually impaired the same, all the same. So your child, if they are intellectually impaired, should be with other students who have the same type of intellectual impairment. For example, let's say that your child can learn vocabulary, but that they don't know what it is. They just can look at the vocabulary and know that it's vocabulary and what it says. That's like reading, okay? But knowing vocabulary you need to know more than that when you're in school. So they're going to teach you vocabulary, and they may have to teach it with pictures. And if they are using pictures for vocabulary, I'm going to tell you, do the same thing at home. Put up signs on everything: refrigerator, cabinet, floor, and go through them with your child every day. Eventually, they may learn the vocabulary of your kitchen or your home. If they do, then they can learn. It just takes them a lot longer to learn the vocabulary. And I'm just using that as an example. Intellectual impairment. The student has to have a lot of time to learn something. A lot of time and repetition and given to them in different ways. And that's okay. If they're learning that way, then that's the way they should be taught. Some kids need to have a person sitting beside them. And that's okay too. And if they do need it, and your team will not give it to you, then don't accept the IEP as written. Because if you see your child learning, say, with the signs in the house or pictures or whatever it is, and they won't, meaning the team, will not put it into the IEP, that you need technical equipment like a computer or iPad. You might need pictures on everything. If you draw a cabinet, that's a picture. But what I'm saying is, when you're at home, put signs on everything and go through those everything every single day until they learn what they are. Your child learns what they are. There are some children who cannot learn anything. That's true. I used to have a client who could not learn anything. But I got her into school with the simple idea that being around other students, being social, even though she couldn't speak, was what she needed for her life. I've had intellectually impaired students, and they were all different. The way that they needed to learn. And the evaluations are supposed to tell you how they are supposed to be taught. Each child is going to be different, as I said. So what you need to do is go through the IEP and make sure that the difference is in your IEP and not the same as your next door neighbor's son. They lump the kids into one classroom, yes, but the instruction has to be individualized because, like I said, no two people are alike. There are things that your child can do than his next door neighbor can do. And it also depends on why they're intellectually impaired. Did they have a birth defect? Did they have a brain bleed when they were young, when they were born? Did they have anything that happened to them? Traumatic brain injury? Anything makes them different than the next person. And being intellectually impaired simply means that they can stay in school until they're 22, their 22nd birthday. During the time that they're in school, after they stop having classes, they'll be doing things like vocational training, being in a school store, learning how to count change, things that can help them as they become adults. Vocational training can be as simple as putting placemats and silverware at the cafeteria. That's learning, and it's a vocation that can give them a job, which is what they should be doing when they fill out the transitional paperwork. The information that's on their transition will be when they turn 14 or 16, depending upon what state you're in. And that information is how you decide what your child can do or will be able to learn to do. So like I said, if they can learn how to set tables, that's something. And that's something you can actually be paid for. Of course, it's not a lot, but it's something. If they're interested in, let's see, working in a store, then they should be working in a store at the school so that they can learn how to count change, what the coins mean, what they are, what they use to buy something. There are lots of reasons why children with intellectual impairment need what's called transition into adulthood. And the reason is because that's when they learn skills and not just academics. And there may come a time even before they turn 16 that the team, including you, determines that they need more vocational training, because the vocational training can help them in their future. That's why it's so important. And it's got to be written on a sheet attached to the IEP called transitioning. And it'll tell you specifically what the school is going to do to help the student learn what they want to do when they get older, what they want to do for a job. Will they need job training? Will they need someone with them while they're working? They do that. And it's okay. Because the point is having a life. Whatever kind of life that you can give a child with intellectual impairment is a great reward for them. Even if they're going to live with you or in a group home, they have to be able to have a life too. And the school is the one to prepare them for life after school. And they help you do that. And if they don't, make them. Because it's very important, especially for a child who cognitively cannot figure out what to do on their own. Unless they have repetition, doing the same thing over and over and over, they won't learn it. And that's what school is for. So, what you would be looking at seriously is, can your child learn? And if they can, how? And that's what you and the team come up with. How do you teach your child who has intellectual impairment? And remember what I said. If it's an outlier, if there's an outlier in their cognitive ability that rises to the level of 80, and not everything is completely tanked, meaning 70 or below, then your child is not intellectually impaired. So what would you call it? It depends on what part of the cognitive profile they have that's 80 or above. It's difficult to teach a child who has a split in their abilities. But what you do is you look at what is it specifically that they can't do, and then you teach to that. And if you know why, like if they had a brain bleed or traumatic brain injury or something while they were being born, I mean, so many things can happen. But you need to know why. Why is my child intellectually impaired? And then what do I do about it? What do we do about it? Meaning you and the team and the IEP. What do they do about it? Like I said, they'll put them in a substantially separate program for kids that are like them. But the good thing is you can teach them about the outside world and not keep them inside of a school. There are lots of things that kids with intellectual impairment can do. Go to the beach, learn about sand and shells and little crawly creatures that come out of the sea. They can learn what an ocean is. They can learn what trees are in the woods. And they can learn that a tree is not just a tree, but it's also got things growing on it or living on it. And they can learn about that because that's all important. Learning about life. That's the best present you can give any child at all. It's important. It's important. No one person wants to spend all of the rest of their life as an adult without understanding their world. And depending upon how much of their world you give them is what they're going to be able to do as they get older. And that's the important part. In conclusion, intellectual impairment is determined by how well a child can cognitively learn and what they can cognitively learn. Some intellectually challenged students can learn how to answer the phone, can learn how to wash a car, sweep a porch, use a leaf blower. I mean, just because they have an intellectual impairment does not mean their life is over. It just means that they learn differently. They're going to transition into a life where they can do something. Just make sure that the school agrees with you and your child if they can explain what they want for their life. And then they'll transition into it as adults. And with that, I want to say thank you for being here and subscribe because I have the information and I want to give it to you. So, ask questions, email me, whatever you can do. Thank you.